That was quite interesting because I am looking at the current state of elections in Africa and the adoption of technology and how we can use technology to reduce the incidence of courtocracy so that people can actually believe in the ballot box rather than believe in the appointed judges who simply give their decisions based on the evidence tendered before them. So on this line, let me come to Dr. Robinson. In an article that Dr. Robinson wrote, he said that technology, cybersecurity, and the 2023 elections in Nigeria: prospects, challenges, and opportunities. So Dr. Robinson said, despite the positive contributions of technology to the quality and integrity of the electoral process, it has not been without attendant debates and controversies. In Kenya's 2013 general elections, the electoral body deployed technology which led to widespread failure with many technical challenges. Alebu documented some of the challenges experienced using biometric technology in Nigeria's 2015 elections, including reliability issues, equipment failure, and user challenges. Sibe argued that the 41% failure rate of the biometric process reported by INEC in the pilot test of the smart card reader technology in 2015 was too significant to ignore. Yet, INEC went ahead with the same technology in the national elections. So we are talking about cases where people have already determined that technology has problems, but they still keep on using it. Are you suggesting at any point that we should withdraw the technology itself, or are you suggesting that we should improve the way we use technology and integrate technology if more effectively in the electoral management system?
Yeah, it's technology is not the problem. Technology could be the problem, but that's also because of the human behind the use of technology. And when we talk about using technology in election, it's something that has always been there for over a century, although very crude technology. From literature as early as 1900, over a century ago, there was a first recorded use of technology in an election where it was used basically for storage, use of mechanical levers. Also down to the 1960s where punch cards were used, down to when David Shum also introduced some sort of electronic voting system. Technology has always been there. And then the very sterling and brilliant example of Estonia, who was the first to do actually e-voting, internet voting, following the passage of their Rigokoku Electoral Act of 2002. So it's always been there, and it succeeded elsewhere. So the question we should ask ourselves is, how come it succeeded elsewhere and it hasn't succeeded here in Africa? In Nigeria, like I mentioned, you did cite the case from the article which I co-authored with Professor Christian Cornott. We have had a lot of challenges in Nigeria. From 1999, it was largely manual, and then in 2003, the first attempt to start some measure of computerization through the use of optical magnetic reader and the use of automatic fingerprint identification system, down to 2007, where the direct data capture machines were deployed, and then in 2015, where the smart card reader, like you just mentioned, was deployed, and then very recently, the BVAS, the Bimodal Voter Accreditation System. The sad reality is that in each of these elections, the election budget continues to increase because we keep dumping one technology for the other without actually asking ourselves the question, what was the cause of the problem? Was it just about technology, or was it about poor planning, or was it about sabotage, or was it about failure? There are some underlying things which you need to find out when you're using technology. When I did a review of other places where technology is used and electoral systems, the themes that emerged, every electoral system must be correct, it must be said to be accurate. So the question we ask ourselves is, these technologies we're using, how accurate is it? There also must be the right legal framework, because for any piece of technology to be recognized in an electoral process, there has to be the right legal framework. And the case in point for Nigeria in 2015, where the then Electoral Act did not contemplate the use of smart card reader at that level. Well, that was corrected eventually, particularly with the signing of the Electoral Act 2022. And then there are things like, election using technology should not alter this principle of elections itself, which is that whatever technology you're using should mirror the traditional steps. It only brings in efficiency, but the fundamental principle of voter anonymity, of accuracy and all of those things must be reflected in whatever technology you're deploying. Cybersecurity is a big issue now, because if you look at the electoral threat landscape, we have cybersecurity issues there, because if you look at the two elections in Ekiti, in Ondo State, the INEC chairman did say that there were lots of cyber attacks, particularly from Asia. The last election, the last presidential election in Nigeria, the then Minister of Communication and Innovation did say that over 12 million attacks were recorded according to the statements which they released, in the period of the presidential election. So these are some of the issues. Also, there has to be a very good level of transparency. People need to see the end-to-end of it. There has to be trust in the system. There has to be the principle of audit and verification. Can you audit these systems? So these are questions which, INEC brings in technology, but they do not allow stakeholders to interrogate this technology. So they bring a black box to you for you to use on an election day. In most cases, you see ad hoc staff not properly trained. In most cases, you see, even in courts, in litigation processes, that's electoral litigation, you see where lawyers are not able to make the right argument. You see where parties are requesting for access to card readers or access to the beavers, and they are not given access to it. These are things that should be subjected to real forensic investigation. So these are things that are human induced, not necessarily because technology failed. I'm not going to give technology a bad name because humans failed, or because humans sabotaged it, or because humans didn't quite know what to do. Things like reliability, even when systems fail, if you subject it to a very great level of reliability test, some of the things that happen on election day could have been spotted before the election, and it could have been fixed. In the last election, there was the issue of transmission, voter transmission, particularly in the presidential election, where the servers were said to have failed. And the reasons they gave had to do with, resource squeeze, lack of having adequate resource, maybe bandwidth issues, I don't know. But these are things that could have been contemplated if you're doing planning. These are things that could have been contemplated. These are things private sector institutions, handle. These are things banks handle. We do online transfers. We do, all sorts of things online, and these things work. So why can't we make it work in elections? I'll tell you the answer. The answer lies with the people, with humans. Technology is there to answer the questions of humans, or to do what the humans ask them to do.
Well, listening to you, I have the impression that you are putting the responsibility on the people managing the systems. Now, election is a multi-stakeholder business. What advice would you give to the opposition, especially because they're a critical stakeholder in this case? What advice do you give to them regarding the being tech savvy, regarding the management of the technical systems of elections? Because if you leave it only within the competence of those who are managing the system, they will definitely do it the way they want. If there is no pressure, they will definitely have no incentive at all to do what they don't want to do. So what is that advice to the opposition?
Well, you're very right. Election is a multi-stakeholder thing. I take us back to one that happened in Germany. The first time Germany tried to do some sort of electronic voting, and a man and his son sued the German electoral body because the argument was that, look, for me to trust an electoral system, I have to be able to see it end to end. It has to be a transparent process, and that this thing you're bringing as technology is opaque to me. I can't see through it. I don't trust it. And he won the case. Himself and his son, they won the case, and that's why there's no electronic voting in Germany today. And the thing is, they didn't annul the election, but they stopped it thereafter. So while you might argue, yeah, opposition and all that, but I think it goes beyond the opposition. It's a multi-stakeholder thing, and we should begin to ask these questions. INEC, before you use a technology, for instance, INEC should subject it to multi-stakeholder interaction. INEC should bring in third parties. So you look at best practice. If you look at Estonia, which is a brilliant example of a nation that uses technology at a very high level, people who audit the electoral process are not members of the electoral body. They are private sector people. They are systems people. They are systems auditors. They are certified auditors. There's also the end-to-end verifiability of the process. So we have to collectively push, and the opposition figures, naturally they are opposition, so expectedly they probably will take the lead. But those who are opposition today might get into power tomorrow. So that's why I'm careful to use the word opposition. The people who are in power today in Nigeria, they were opposition in 2015. So it's something that all well-meaning citizens should be able to ask these questions, should be able to push for these things to be done. If you're doing an election with technology, or you're introducing a new piece of technology, one of the best practices is pilot testing. And in this case, INEC did pilot testing. In some other climes, like in Kenya, the first time that there was a failure in 2013, not sure there was proper pilot testing at the time. But then when you do proper pilot testing, what do you learn? The lessons you learn from it, did you apply anything? Did you learn from it? Did you get stakeholders to interrogate the process? Did you tell us the protocol to extract data, to extract digital evidence? So if, for instance, a client is interested in investigating what happened at a particular polling unit, and there was a beavers, and is interested in carrying out a forensic investigation of that, have you documented the step-by-step process of extracting digital evidence from that device, in line with best practice, to make it forensically sound and to make it legally defensible? Those are protocols and processes that has to be clearly established. And these are the things that will make someone have, trust in the system. If you go, I keep going back to the banking system. If you go to the banking system, there's an SOP for everything. It's an SOP for your audit. There's also business continuity plan in case of issues, disaster recovery plan in case of issues. Do we have such documentation in the electoral bodies? So it requires a total overhaul of the people, the process, and the systems.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Robinson. You mentioned the evidence question. You mentioned litigation. Let me switch over to